A while back I had a couple of video exchanges with Symbolic, who I don't think's made any videos recently, but this is about value, and I can't remember the details of who said what, but the end result of it, for me at least, was some thoughts about the relationship between value and embodiment, and to do with evolution and bodily response, that kind of thing. And I've been thinking some more about that, really, because it's almost as if we have this abstract concept of value, you know what I mean, which just kind of floats around in our head and which can assign artificially to ideas, and some of which persist over time, you know, like gold, for example, seems to have been regarded as a valuable object or a valuable substance for a long, long time, and others go in and out of fashion, you know, like the tulips for a while in Europe, and whatever it was, 16th, 17th century, there was a massive tulip fad, when some tulips would cost thousands and thousands of pounds. And so some values go up and down, you know, with the whims of fashion. Yeah, but as I say, some persist. So we have this abstract idea of value, which, as I say, we can assign artificially, or which marketers and advertisers can decide for us, unfortunately. Or we can negotiate amongst ourselves. We can decide what values these certain things have, particularly things like moral and ethical values. Obviously, it's very important that. But what this conversation with Symbolic was about, or for me at least, was to do with the origins of that concept. You know, given that it's a free-floating concept in our head, purely abstract, if you like, where does that abstraction come from? And what I was speculating there, and I don't think it's complete speculation, I think I've read something about this somewhere, is that it must have its origins in an embodied experience. Because abstractions can't just appear from nowhere, they must enter through experience or enter through evolutionary processes. And the concept of value presumably comes through positive and negative experiences that our body has. In other words, pleasures and pains, sufferings and flourishings, if you like. It must come about through those kinds of experiences, which provide some sort of kind of calibration, some kind of embodied sense of variance in the world. Because the world isn't flat in terms of its value. The world is very corrugated and gradiated in terms of the positive and negative values that it has. And I think they are different, positive and negative value, by the way. I don't think the positive value isn't just the absence of negative experience, and vice versa. You know, negative value isn't just the opposite of positive experience. Pleasure isn't just the absence of pain, and pain isn't just the absence of pleasure. They're very different things. But yeah, as I say, for most of us at least, the world doesn't lack affect. You know, it has all this affect around it, positive and negative stuff going on all the time, even very subtle stuff sometimes. And I would imagine that's where value comes from. Because certainly in terms of pleasures and pains, you know, if I bang my head on a low beam, I could probably give that a negative value rating of about 4, let's say. If I had a wisdom tooth extracted, I'd probably say that had a negative value of 6. Childbirth, negative value of 8, although I'd never experienced it myself, of course, thank God. The last hours in the life of Guy Fawkes, negative value of 9 or 9.5, since he was effectively tortured to death. And similarly with the pleasurable bit, you know, the positive value. You know, having a head massage by a loved one, you'd probably give a positive value of 5, 6 maybe. Hot sex, you'd probably give a bit of a higher positive value to. I don't know what would be top of that scale. Well, actually I can think of a few things, but they're not for public consumption. So what? Yeah, I suppose the logical outcome for me of that is to do with what happens when we start making evaluations. Because I think it's not just me, tend to think of a value scale, like the scales of 1 to 10 in the positive direction, or 1 to 10 in some kind of negative scale, as kind of free floating outside of experience. So I find myself doing what I just did, which is take an experience like a wisdom tooth extraction and then compare it to some hypothetical abstract scale. But the scale itself comes from the experience, so the arrows are going in the wrong direction, aren't they, I think? You know what I mean? It's not so much that that having your wisdom tooth out is a 6 on the negative scale. It's -6 on the scale is the equivalent of having your wisdom tooth out. So the arrow points in the opposite direction. So when we're trying to say something is good or something is bad, which are these positive and negative evaluations, it's a bit tautological, it's a bit circular. You know what I mean? To say having a wisdom tooth out is bad, well, of course it is. It's the definition of bad. It's an analytic truth, I think you would say. You know, in the same way that you would that's a phrase like all unmarried men are bachelors. That's an analytic truth. It's true by definition. All unmarried men are bachelors. So having a wisdom tooth out is a bad thing. It's again true by analytical definition. Yeah. I don't know where I'm going with this really. There's just something interesting there for me about the about ethical evaluations. You know, when we evaluate something ethically and say that this painful experience is bad, and we should feel bad about that painful experience because it's bad, we're not really adding anything to it. We're just confirming that our definition of the word bad comes from our embodied experiences of things like pains and sufferings, or conversely flourishings and pleasures. I think that sounds about right. I don't think I've explained myself at all well there, actually. I'll have to have another go at this at some point. I suppose all I'm saying, no, forget it. I'll come back to it later.